hello again. Welcome to another episode of the KashCast. KashCast. I'm sorry. It's me, Cash, and I have a new guest with me. In honor of Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs dropping soon on HBO Max, I have Talya Perper, who's boarded and directed on the show, and also currently boards on Teen Titans Go. She's also worked on Pickle and Peanut in the past and has wrote some Steven Universe comics. It's really great to have her here. And as always, before we begin, if you have anything you want to add, feel free to jump in.
Oh, hey, thank you so much for having me on the pod. I'm happy to be here. I don't know how else I should introduce myself. I guess I'm a storyboard artist. I was a director on Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs. I'm really excited. It's coming out September 30th. I don't know exactly when this is going to drop, but I'm very excited for it to be out in the world finally.
Yes, for sure. So let's just start with a lowball question, and obviously eventually transition to Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs discussion. So first off, how did you get your start in animation?
So, it's actually a really long and convoluted tale. I'll try to make it as brief as possible. I graduated from Boston University, from their film school, College of Communication, with a major in film and TV and minor in Japanese. And then I went to, I did their BU in LA internship program, and I did some internships there that were not quite related to animation, because BU is awesome for the entertainment world. They have a lot of connections, but they don't know a lot about animation. So it took me moving out here and living in LA, and I got a job at a graphic design studio as an admin assistant just to pay the bills. I worked on that while I was also taking a la carte classes like Rad Secrets, figure drawing and storyboarding classes, and some figure drawing through Concept Design Academy, which was great because I really needed those fundamentals, and I wasn't able to get them at school because I was learning more about film structure and analysis and stuff like that.
Right.
So I'm glad that I got the film structure stuff first, because I knew that if I took a la carte classes, I would eventually figure it out. So I was doing that, working at a non-art job, and then, long story short, I got fired from that job because they were like, well, you clearly want to do animation and we clearly need a manager, someone who wants to be an admin person forever. So this is probably going to be the best thing for you. And I was like, okay, cool, but I need money. So I was like, I honestly really struggled for a couple of years out of school, because I was working full time at this admin job and then also doing art stuff and trying to hustle. And then at a certain point, I was like, damn it, I lost this critical job. Now what am I going to do? And it really put the fire under my ass to start networking more seriously. And not just networking, but strategizing for how to even get a job in art that I wanted to get. Because I really wanted to be a board artist. Because I knew that was kind of the fastest track to animation writing in my research, whatever research I could do online. So I ended up, while I was at that graphic design company, I learned how to make zines, which are self-published comics, for anyone who's not familiar with the term. A zine can be anything. It can be poetry, photography, whatever. But for my purposes, it would be comics, because it's a really efficient way to show that you know how to tell a story and that you know how to draw and that you can be entertaining in any form. So that was really great that I learned how to self-publish my own books, because graphic design, there were people I met there who were very critical to my growth, and I'm very grateful to them. So through people I met at my job and other people that I met through drink and draws and like just socializing with other artists, I eventually gained enough knowledge to start figuring out like, okay, how do I get a test for a storyboard job? Like, who do I even talk to? Like, where are the recruiters? Like, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So through those drink and draws, I sort of got us like my first seeds of connections, and then eventually I started working on Pickle and Peanut because I took a storyboard test that they liked. And so I was like, okay, here we go. Working for the mouse. Don't have to work part-time anymore. Like, this is the beginning. And so I started working on Pickle and Peanut, and I worked there for 4 weeks. And then they were like, okay, bye. And I was like, wait, I thought I could stay. But no. So that was like, I mean, in retrospect, I was just really green. And like, I explained this on another interview, but I think part of the issue was that I loved that show a lot. It was a really surreal, like, I couldn't even believe that it was on Disney.
Yeah, right?
Like, it's such a great, like, it's a fantastic concept. Really talented people worked on it. I'm so lucky that I got to meet them in the short time that I was there.
Right.
But I think because it was so counterintuitive to the way that I thought, even though I was trying really hard to stay on the show, it was like not what they were looking for. And so, and by the time I was hired, they were already like really over schedule and over budget. So they were like, they weren't really willing to invest the time in teaching me how to do it. And that was something that I thought was really valuable about like the director that I worked with while I was there, Ryan Gillis, was a real bro, because he was telling me at the end, like, hey, I just want to let you know that like this isn't a reflection of your talent, because we've had like many people come in freelance essentially, and they come and go and they're all extremely talented. So like this is not a reflection of you like not being good enough, which was very meaningful to me. It became more meaningful even later on. So I worked on one episode of Pickle and Peanut called, I think it's called Granny's Cat House. And then I was struggling again for like a year of like working part-time, volunteering, just a lot. In the meantime, I also got my first comics writing job, which was cool because like it was through Ben Levin, who I met through a mutual friend, Anna Tess, who I met at my old job. Because like she knew lots of animation people and introduced me to him because I was a huge fan of Doris and Marianne Are Breaking Out of Prison, which is one of his
I remember those shorts.
It's so good. And I was watching it at work, and Anna was like, "Oh, I know that guy. He's really nice. I should introduce you guys." So it was like I guess that's the benefits of not being a good employee. But in any case, he was extremely helpful because I asked him for advice when I was applying to the Nickelodeon writing program, and I knew that he was a writer on Steven Universe, and I love Steven Universe, so I was like, oh, maybe I'll write a spec script for Steven Universe, and I'll show it to him and be like, hey, like, do you think this is a good enough entry to this contest? And even though nothing ultimately came of the writing program, I didn't like make the cut or whatever. It was still enough that Ben saw that I could write, and that I could write for the show, because I think my spec script was actually like eerily similar to an episode that came out later.
Whoa.
It was like, I think mindful education was about meditation, and my spec script was about like, oh, Stevani's meditating or something like that.
Right.
And it was like not, I mean, obviously with Steven Universe specifically, there's like so much lore that you're not aware of. So I was just like, oh, well, I mean, at least I can show that I'm like capable of writing in the voices of these characters.
Yeah.
So and
That's
then
still like one hell of a coincidence, huh?
yeah, it was pretty wild. So like he was super sweet and helped me out with this contest script that went nowhere. And then later on in December in LA, or around December, there's this convention called Comic Arts LA, which it's honestly my favorite convention, like for comics and animation professionals in LA, because it's a little more intimate and like indie comics type of stuff. So I saw Rebecca Sugar at this con just walking around.
Neat.
And I had a zine on me. So I was like, so Nick was actually the one who was like, that's Rebecca Sugar over there. You should go say hello to her. And I was like, oh my God, okay. Like, because when I was in that internship program at BU, they really drill it into you that like, if you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Right.
So like, I summoned my courage and then talked to her for a little bit, and it was just like, hey, are you Rebecca Sugar? I love your work. How are you? Like, I didn't know what to say. I was just like, I didn't want to waste her time. But she was very sweet and like gave me an answer that I was like too nervous to even absorb. But like I said, oh, like that's awesome. I'm glad. Listen, I'm handing these out to people I meet today. Like, here you go. Have an awesome day. And then I left and I was like immediately mortified. Like I truly embarrassed myself. I was like such a creep. But but it turned out to be fine, because later on, like I got an email out of the blue from Boom Studios, which is the company that makes the Steven Universe comics.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, do you want to write a graphic novel for Steven Universe? Like, apropos of nothing. I was like, is this a dream? Am I having a dream right now? Like, what's happening? So apparently, like, Ben heard that they were looking for comics people to write for Steven Universe, and he brought up my name to Rebecca, and Rebecca remembered my zine from this comics convention, and she was like, yeah, she seems like she could do it. Give her a shot. And so, like, the first one that I wrote, Anti-Gravity, I asked Ben for a lot of advice. And then after that, they actually asked me to do two more books, because they liked how I did the first time.
Yeah.
But by that time, Ben was already show running on Craig of the Creek. Right. So I was like, okay, I don't think I can ask him for advice. He's pretty busy. So yeah. I did the second two, which were Ultimate Down and Crystal Clean. And so that, like, those are all original stories that like exist in their own universe. Yeah. But the thing is, with comics, you get paid like per page of script. So it was not like, it was good freelance. It was good for my career in terms of like proving that I could write, but it wasn't sustainable income.
Right.
So then I was like writing these books and then also struggling. Like I was working at a cafe. It was so embarrassing, because I had already told people, like, I had left the part-time job that I got after I got fired from the graphic design thing. So I got another part-time job, and I left that part-time job to go work on Pickle and Peanut. And then I got fired from Pickle and Peanut. And then like my old coworkers saw me working at the cafe, and they were like, I'm sure they were all like, oh no, what happened? And I was so like mortified. And then I was also like taking tests and stuff. And then eventually I was at my friend Anna's birthday party, and I reconnected with a guy, John Vermilia, who is now a friend of mine, because he was the art director on Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs. Hey. And like I saw him at this party, I gave him a zine. Like I thought he didn't like me at first because he's such a stoic guy, but he was just like happily like talking to me, and I was like, oh, this is great. Cool. yeah, health insurance would love some of that stuff. And then you could like kind of hear the gears in his brain shifting around.
Right.
And he's
right.
like, wait a second. The show I'm working on is testing for boards. You should test. And I was like,
Yeah.
of course I will test. And so I tested, and it was a blind test. So it meant that like John recommended me to take it.
Right.
So he like sent my information to the line producer. But and Mark Merrick was the showrunner, and he was deciding on people with the blind test, basically. So like my name wasn't on my file. It was just like purely based on whether he thought I could do it just from the work. So I have a biased perspective on testing because it got me a job. Because at the time I didn't have much of a portfolio. There was not a lot that I could share. So testing was like the one way that I could prove myself to an employer.
Yeah.
So I took this test. I got the job miraculously because I look back on that test and I didn't know anything about Flash. Like Nick, my fiance, had to teach me Flash to do this test. And so like I look back on it and like everything's in one layer. The sound is not synced correctly. It's like there are all these like horrible technical issues, but there was enough there in terms of the acting, like the character acting and the staging, that I guess Mark must have made the decision mentally that like, okay, well, if it's a technical issue, then I can work through that with her. Yeah. So then I started working on Yabba, and my board partner at the time, Josh Weisbrod, and I were the first two board artists to start on the show.
Mm-hmm, cool.
Which I did not know when I got hired. So there was like this awkward period where I was like, okay, well, I had like such intense imposter syndrome because I had come off of this show where they basically told me to, I can swear on this show, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like where they basically told me like fuck off, and then I started on Yabba. And they were like, cool, we want to give you all this responsibility for like...
Oh, yeah, like 0 to 100.
Because like we had character models, but I was like, oh, so like, do we know where we live? Like, do we know where the characters live? Like the houses and the layouts of the houses and like the jungle area and like... Are all these things figured out? And they were like, no, make it up. And I was like, but I don't know what I'm doing. So like so that was stressful, and then like the first few weeks I was just like basically learning Flash on the job, which was like intense. But somehow I made it through, and like it was definitely a lot of like working on Flash files on the weekend just to teach myself the program, because like I feel like that's one of the fastest ways to learn is to be like, okay, I don't know how to do XYZ. Let me look up a tutorial and figure it out. Oh, yeah. But that takes time when you're on the clock, you know? So, like, I'm glad that I invested that time to learn the program on my own time, just to invest in myself, you know? Yeah. And then eventually I didn't have to do that anymore. I was, like, comfortable enough with the program that I could just, like, hit the ground running. So I was boarding on that show for 9 months. And then eventually one of the other directors left to go work on another WB show. Mm-hmm. And that left an opening. And then I got called into a meeting with Mark, and he was like, hey, so do you want to direct?
I remember seeing that comic on your site.
Yeah, it was like such a surreal experience because it went like I can't emphasize enough how much it felt like a complete 180 going from Pickle and Peanut to Yabba. Because on Pickle and Peanut, like I said, I wasn't the best fit for the show ultimately. And like for a long time, I thought I just like was a screw up, you know? Right. And then like coming onto Yabba and feeling like so at home, it was a really meaningful thing for me. So I started directing on Yabba because I knew that like in the back of my head, I was like, well, this show isn't going to last forever. And if I'm going to learn how to do this, this is the best crew to learn how to do this with because they're extremely supportive. I've already been working with all these board artists for months. I'm really familiar with all of their strengths and weaknesses. I feel like I understand the vision of the show really well. So yeah, it was a really, really fun time of my life, and I'd love to do directing again. And then at a certain point, so I directed for 7 months after that, and then Yabba was canceled unceremoniously because, and the like, it's a pretty straightforward reason. It was because the show was designed for Boomerang,
Right.
and Boomerang in the in the in the age of HBO Max is pretty obsolete at this point because Boomerang was meant to be like, do you want to pay $5 to watch legacy WB Hanna-Barbera like old cartoons and also new original content that's like based on those properties?
Right.
But like it just doesn't totally make sense to pay $5 a month for that when you could pay like a nominal amount more and get like everything in the WB library.
Right.
So I think around the time that the AT&T merger was happening, that's when they decided to like get rid of those shows. So it was us, Wacky Races, and I think like a Wizard of Oz thing. And so that was kind of a punch to the gut for sure.
Yeah, I can
there
imagine.
Were a bunch of episodes. There were a bunch of episodes that we worked on that were never going to see the light of day at this point. So that was bad.
Yeah.
but then there was this big scramble for like, how are we going to place people? Because WB actually is pretty good about like, if they have people that they like, they want to place them on other shows at WB because they like preserving the talent.
Yeah.
So Yabba, like, you know, the line producer and Mark both put in a good word for me on Teen Titans Go, which like, I don't know if I've explained this either, but like Teen Titans Go is created by Aaron Horvath and Michael Jelinek.
Yeah.
Aaron Horvath is like a Flash. He's also a Flash guy, and he was basically Mark's protege, as I was told. Like he learned how to do what he does from Mark. So that's why like Teen Titans Go and Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs are structured nearly exactly the same in terms of like the schedule, the software, the workflow, the pipeline. So I was very lucky that I got to learn how to board from this guy who like had such a big influence on this other extremely popular show.
Yeah.
So I tested for Titans just out of principle, and they liked my tests, and I got hired, and I started on season 6 in January of 2019, and that's where I've been ever since. So sorry that was such a long-winded tale, but
oh, that's no problem. I mean, like I think we ended up like getting like probably like 3 bullets, like just like knocked off right there. So hey, like +1 for efficiency, but nah, it's just like really great to just like hear your origins, and it's obviously just like a really huge globe story just for like going like immediately just like rocky waters to a an environment that like obviously knows what you're capable of, and like people respect that and like see the value in you, because that really does mean a lot.
It's like I get emotional thinking about it, like, and I feel very passionate about telling people how I've struggled, because I mean, like, the other thing is I'm also very privileged. Like I live with my partner. My parents were very supportive. They helped me out a lot. Like, I don't want to discount that, because there were like, the years that I was struggling the most, I had a support network. So like, I also don't blame anyone who has to like work at a non-art job for longer, because that's just like the reality of people's situations.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really important to show that like, if you don't go directly from college to job, you're not a failure. because there were times, like, at my most depressed, I thought that I had really truly fucked up, and that I had, like, made a horrible mistake, that I went to the wrong type of school, but like, I meet more and more artists all the time now who come from every kind of background, and it is like, it's definitely difficult from different angles, but it's not impossible. And
Yeah.
I really want to drill that home for people, that, like, you have time to figure it out. And, like, if you're hustling and you're genuine and you go out and you, like, make stuff, share it with your friends, network with your peers, and take lots of board tests. It's truly just a matter of time until things pop off.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, like a lot of that, no, a lot of the thoughts that you just said are stuff that has been mirroring for me, like this year, especially this month, because I'm officially a college graduate, and you know, personally, like I had talked about this in a previous episode, but I originally did not go to an art college or even an art major. But I was lucky when the place I was volunteering at was supportive enough to, like, for me, like, want to pursue just getting to the industry.
But that is a really relatable feeling, I think, for a lot of artists. And you're definitely not alone in it. And like I said, I meet more and more people all the time. Like, my teacher for the figure drawing and storyboarding class is Rad Seacrest, who is also the showrunner of Hippo and the Age of the Wonder Beasts, and amongst other amazing things. Like, I think he opened his class by saying, like, oh yeah, I was an engineering student. Like, he was drawing buildings. He was like he was making, like, blueprints for buildings, and he made the decision at a certain point, like, oh, it's actually more feasible for me to, like, get my work manifested as a cartoon than it would be to get it manifested as a building. Like, so, like, it truly, I find that the most inspiring type of story, where it's like, yeah, you think that this is like a stable, like a smart, stable career, but it's actually, you know, like, art is this idea of the struggling artist is not totally true, you know, because like, I mean, like, storyboard artists in general make really good money. Like, my parents were, like, shocked at how, like, I was able to support myself and, like, live in LA, like, on my own dime. Like, they were, and, like, my dad was a doctor, so, like, he was under this impression that I was gonna be eating, like, ramen noodles every day, but that's just not, like, that's not the reality. Like, art can be a really smart career, especially if you're really passionate about it and, like, you're willing to go through the rigmarole that is art as a job. Because, like, every job is a job. Like, every job is work. Like, there's always parts of my job that I'm like, ugh, but I also love it way more than I hate it. So, like, yeah, it's just, you know, adulthood, just part of it.
Yeah. So with that, as we're, like, talking about industry and experiences, I'll try to transition to, like, our first viewer question.
Sure.
So Giga Jane asks, what's your favorite part of working in the animation industry that no one really talks about?
Oh, so I'll give a little spoily and say that I actually looked at some of these questions before we started, because I was just peeking at what to expect. And I gotta tell you, last night I was, like, staring at my ceiling just thinking about this question, because it really, like, tapped into a core part of my personality. Like, so yeah, I think there's, like, two parts that I really love. One of them is that I love the creative problem solving of the job, because I love the feeling of asking myself and the people around me, which of these fart noises is funnier? And it's like, it just brings me so much joy that I'm getting paid to make these decisions. Like, so that's definitely a part that I feel people don't talk about enough. Like, that's such a joy to experience. And then the other thing that I think is really important is the fact that I get to be part of this cast of characters. Like, the people that you get to work with as a part of this job, it's very meaningful to me because I grew up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, which is like, I mean, it's a great place to raise kids, but there's like not a lot going on, and especially in terms of animation or entertainment. Like,
right.
A lot of what I learned, I had to learn through like Tumblr or like, the internet in general, Twitter, like people that I saw like way out of my zone. Yeah. And I was like very excited to get out of my small town and start being around people who really got it. Because for a lot of my young life, I was around people who didn't understand what I was trying to do, didn't understand the industry of animation, didn't understand that I wasn't just like being immature. Like, it was hard to explain what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And then when I got out to LA and I started meeting more animation people, it was just sort of an understanding of like, oh yeah, I want to do that for the rest of my life too. So you don't even have to explain like why you think it's cool or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's such an important feeling, like to find your people. It's just critical. And like, I think of all the people that I've met over the course of my career and how fun their personalities are and how they just inspire me on a daily basis. It's part of the reason why I love directing so much, is because you get to interact with a lot of different types of characters.
Right.
And I also love the creative problem solving of that. Like, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Like, how do I communicate this point to this particular person? How do I get them to really come alive? Like that, it's just the best feeling ever. I don't know how to explain it better than that. But yeah, great question.
Oh yeah, that was pretty concise. And now just like transitioning to something for me, and pardon me in advance because I'm gonna fanboy for a bit. But I noticed not only are you a fan of Kablam, which is good, it's one of my favorite shows, but you were directly working with Mark Merrick, who was obviously the person who made the Henry and June segments. So first off, I wanted to ask, what is like about the show that you like that like has resonated with you for this whole time? And then you could just like talk about your experience of like working with Mark Merrick.
It's funny that you mentioned that fan art, because like I got inspired to do that fan art because I saw other people were doing fan art of it, and I was like, oh my god, this is my moment. But yeah, Kablam, I was just thinking about that, like being nostalgic about my childhood and stuff like that. And I feel like Kablam was a really unique show, especially the Henry and June segments, because it was like this breaking the fourth wall humor that I think was like starting. It definitely gained a little bit of traction when we were kids, like in the 90s and the aughts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And even like, I mean, the Muppets is similar too, where it's like, oh, you see behind the curtain and like they're running a show and like, and there was something kind of fun and encouraging about seeing these kid characters acting like adults and like being stars, and like, but also being goofy and kid-like. And the humor was just a lot more mature, I think, than, I mean, as wacky and like off the wall as it was still like talking up to kids, which I feel really passionate about now too. Like, I know I'm kind of using that word as a crutch, but like it's true. I like, there are so many shows out there that they're like concocted by executives who are really detached from childhood, and they are just like, oh, well, we'll do this thing that's popular, and like kids won't know the difference, you know, like
Right.
they're like there's this attitude of like kids are dumb, which I think is really damaging, because I remember when I was volunteering back when I was like doing all these tests, um I I was volunteering at this place called 826 LA, which does like creative writing and tutoring for kids after school. So
Aw.
I was working with a lot of kids, and it's just like it's shocking how effective it is to just be like, "Oh yeah, you're smart. You figured it out. Like you solved the problem. You did your homework. That's great." Like
Yeah.
even just saying kids are smart, like they believe it, you know,
Yeah.
and then they
It's
become,
positive
and then
affirmation.
it's
Yeah.
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of like now like you're a critical thinker now. And so back to Kablam, I feel like that style of humor really shapes kids, and I'm very grateful that we had such like amazing variety in that show too, and it like opened your mind to like how to interact and make jokes, and there was just a lot, and it seems so hard to quantify, but that's part of the reason why I love it so much. And
Yeah.
then when it comes to Mark, like Mark's a very important person in my life because he was this guy who like basically gave me a shot, and now I have a career.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he wouldn't see it like that, but when I think about like comparing my experience earlier in my career where like I was definitely very green and there just wasn't time to invest in teaching me. When I started on Yabba, there were many times where, especially in the beginning, where I was learning how to board and flash, and I would go into these reviews with Mark, and he would sit with me for hours just teaching me the difference between groups and symbols and like
Oh,
showing me
wow.
how to like make shots into their own symbols, and like showing me all these things that like I honestly get emotional thinking about how like he really didn't have to do that.
Aw.
So and it's funny because he comes off as such a grouch, and I think that's like part of his brand is that like, oh, I'm a grouchy guy, but like when you actually look at his actions, he's like a very golden-hearted person. So it was great working with him, and it felt very satisfying to know that like he had these high standards for the show, like because Yabo was a show that he really he wanted it to look like his stuff, because
Yeah.
like he's been working with WB for many years,
Yeah.
and there's always this phenomenon of like, you know, you do the boards and they have all this flavor, and then it goes through design and layout and animation, and like you need that collaboration to even make a show, period.
Yeah.
But by the end, by the time it actually gets to the screen, it's lost some of the flavor.
Oh,
uh
right. Right.
and like some of it is because they're like trying to angle it towards a specific audience, or they're trying to make it clean or like
Yeah.
palette friendly, you know. But Mark's stuff has always been really raw and chaotic. Like he has a background in painting, so like a lot of his compositions are things that people who have only studied cartoons wouldn't even think to conceive of. It's like
Right.
and that's very inspiring to me. So I tried to absorb as much as I could from him, especially because like when I when John was telling me about the job, it was like, oh, I'm like we're testing for boards, and he said like, oh, Mark is show running it, and I was like, oh, where like I wasn't familiar with his name, and he was just like, oh, Kablam. And I was like, oh, I know Kablam. And then I got the test, and the test was like, okay, here's like some rough character designs. Here's the script. Go nuts. And so like the designs were really rough, and I was like, oh, this doesn't seem like like what I would think WB would do. And then I saw they also sent an animatic that Mark had done of a different project as like it will make it look like this essentially.
Right.
And as soon as his designs were in motion, it was like a completely different experience. It was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. Like, it was just like a come to God moment of
Yeah.
like, whoa, I need to learn how to do this. So I feel very, very grateful that he was like the guy who gave me a shot to start. And I'm really excited for what he's working on now, but I don't want to talk about it because it's not my place to talk about. But
Right.
like definitely keep an eye out for his stuff. I'm very hyped.
Oh, for sure. Like Mark, no, he's another one of my favorite artists that I've kept up with like over the years. Like I as a as someone who's also a lost median, on the side, I really admire the fact that he went through the times like upload his master tapes of Kablam to his own personal website.
Oh my God, yeah. His website is so wild.
Yeah.
It's really funny. My God.
Oh man. And to be honest, what you were mentioning earlier about, how rough, in a good way, of course, like some storyboards can be, and, how Mark wants to embrace that, that's actually something that that's something I want to embrace myself. But when I was looking at storyboards from like a previous WB project, Right Now Kapow, which, we had discussed earlier on this show with a freelance writer who did some work on it. I remember, like, of course, like the show looks good, but it was just funnier seeing like Mark's style because he just exaggerates the expressions. Like, it's rough, but it's like unfiltered in a good way, and just, you know what I mean, the vibes and all that.
Absolutely. I know exactly what you mean. There was a piece of advice that I remember picking up. This is like ancient for me and my life, but back in the DeviantArt days, Thurip Van Orman, who is the creator of the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, he had an account on DeviantArt, and I remember very clearly he had some post that was talking about how ugly drawings are funny.
Yeah.
And I was like, and like, I think especially when you're starting out in animation or art, there's this obsession with like, I have to draw good. I have to draw well. And like, that is good. Like, you definitely need the fundamentals. I'm not trying to say like, fuck the fundamentals.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, once you have an understanding of the rules, then you can start breaking the rules and making things that like are so upsetting looking to see. And that is a joke in itself. Along those same lines, there was another great piece of advice that I picked up because this is like also ancient because Cinefamily, the theater in LA, is no longer here. But back when it still existed, they did this festival called Animation Breakdown, and one of the events that I remember going to with Nick was it was hosted by Christy Caracas, who created Super Jail. Ooh. And he did a midnight show where he just invited all his friends to share their favorite insane YouTube videos. And I was really curious, so I went, and it was just such a great curation of like insanity. And I think as a sheltered child myself, I'm always fascinated with other people's perspectives like that.
Yeah.
And he, I think it was him. It was either him or one of his friends who said, it's so easy to like things that are good. Challenge yourself to like things that are bad and figure out what you like about them. And that was like, those two pieces of advice had such a huge impact on me because I was such a perfectionist. I was like trying to do things that were beautiful or cute, but my skills were just not at the level at the time that I could even measure up to like students that were applying to art school or people who were on Tumblr who had like millions of views and followers or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was meaningful to be like, you know, you can just draw shitty and like people will love it. Like,
Yeah.
and honestly, one thing that we don't really talk about in boards is like a lot of your job is drawing shitty. like,
Yeah.
like I think, I'm sorry to jump the gun a little bit, but I saw that someone asked like, how many drawings do you do in a day?
Yeah, that was our TCB. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's always a difficult question for me to answer because, well, first of all, because Flash is really timeline based. So, like, I'm not really counting how many drawings I'm doing. It's more like I have to get through about like maybe like 30-ish seconds a day to stay on top of my work. It's like having a long-term project all the time. So like I
Right.
have to like divide up like, okay, I have this much time to do it. Like 2 weeks to do a full pass of thumbs. That's like 10 days. If I do like, yeah, if I do like about 30 to 35 seconds of thumbs a day, then I'll be in good shape, you know? So
Right.
like I don't have to stress out. Like I think when I was starting out, I was very stressed out because I was just like, it's not done yet. I need it to be done now. But like now that I have this whole quota thing of like, I just do the math at the start and then I figure out like, okay, if I can get up to this checkpoint, then I'll be in good shape. So, but then the other thing is with when you're talking about drawings, like everyone has a different idea of what a good drawing is.
Right.
So, like, yeah, I'm doing definitely like hundreds and thousands of drawings for these boards, for these animatics, because like each individual pose, but like, is one drawing different from another just because it has a different eye direction or like a different arm? Like it depends on what you're talking about there. But and then the other thing is like the cleaned up drawings definitely take a little bit more time to figure out than the shitty stick figures I do to block stuff in. So like I get through a lot more faster in the 2 weeks that I'm just thumbing. And then once that's all approved and like everything looks good to the eyeballs of the director, then I can go back and make it look beautiful.
Right.
But even my most beautiful drawing is not even close to what some of these animators can do. And that's why they have the job that they have. They're like exceptional draftsmen. So like even my top level drawings are like kind of shitty compared to what other amazing artists that we have on staff can do. So I don't know if that answers the question adequately enough, but that's just my perspective on it.
Oh no, I think that's a pretty apt answer. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, okay. But we'll transition to two questions actually. We have okay. So we have questions from our last guest, Kareen Engel. So hey.
Hi, Kareen.
Hi. So, question 1, yo, Talya, what you snacking on lately? And question 2, what's a piece of media you consumed lately that you particularly enjoyed?
Okay, what am I snacking on lately? On a typical day, I like a spicy chip of sorts, some kind of a, like, I really love Flamin' Hot Cheetos, but there's a boycott on that right now, so I'm trying to stave off from the Cheetos. But in terms of spicy stuff, one thing that I've been trying, I don't eat this while I work because it's a little too messy, but after work, I've been really into, here's a nice little recipe for you. Vanilla ice cream, top it off with some honey, just pure honey, and then red pepper flakes. Oh. It's a really nice combo, and I'm kind of low-key obsessed with it right now. I also started getting into chili crisp, which is like, I mean, like I was learning about it because I kept getting sponsored ads for it, but I tried it finally, and it's really good. And they suggest like, oh, you can put it on ice cream. And I'm such a savory bitch that I just want everything to be umami. And it's really good. But you have to be careful because it's like, it's pretty rich. You know?
Yeah.
So that's what I've been snacking on lately, in short. And And then her second question was, what's a piece of media that I like lately?
Yeah.
I'm really addicted to rom-com manga. So I have a few on my rotation that I've been like peeking on as often as possible. Rent a Girlfriend is the one that I talk about with my friend Bronco every week. But it's been getting pretty trashy, so I don't know if I want to necessarily recommend it. It's just one of these things where it's like, all right, confess.
Right.
All right, like, next chapter, he's definitely gonna confess. It's like, when?
Like, get on with it.
So there's that, and then there's so the story of a dumb prefect and a high school girl with an inappropriate skirt length. There's a huge meme of like, there are all these manga coming out now that have like really literal titles.
Yeah.
They're really funny to me. Like, I'm banging my rival in a parallel world? Like, I turned into a girl and turned on all the nights. I need to have sex to turn back? Question mark? Exclamation point? So stuff like that is really fun. And then I also, on Netflix, I'm really into Midnight Diner, which is a show that no one else I know is watching. But it's really fun. It's like it's a sappy soap opera type thing about a diner in Japan that's only open from like midnight to 7 a.m. And then they get all sorts of crazy characters who show up and have wild stories to tell. And it's like, a lot of it's really overacted, but I don't know. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be too weeaboo-y about it either, because a lot of it is Japanese stuff.
Yeah.
I've also been reading Golden Kamuy lately. That's really good. Highly, highly recommend. Like, one of the best seinen manga I've read in a long, long time. Yeah, I feel like it's all Japanese stuff, but I guess that's just who I am.
Hey, that's no shame. I mean, like, I'm big Tokuder. Karina's obviously big Tokuder. I mean, like, I feel like it's kind of like an in-joke when just like watching anime stuff these days, just like how many obscure anime references you can find. So
yeah,
you know, it's whatever.
I try not to. I mean, like, when stuff's really hyped up, it sort of turns me off to it because I'm like, all right, sure. But
yeah.
But Bronco also got me into Haikyuu, and Haikyuu is like one of the best shonen manga I've read in a long time. Also,
Ooh.
like, and I was very skeptical about it going in because I was like, sports.
Yeah.
I get it, but it's a very human story on top of that. I think I like stuff that really dives into character, and like whatever that happens to be. And I also like watching things that are like off the beaten path for me, even like stuff that I would not normally watch. Like, Nick has been reading Dune lately, and so he was like, let's watch the David Lynch Dune. And I was like, hell yeah, I love David Lynch. Let's go. And it was such a shit show. Oh my god. Like, imagine going into that movie and not having any context. Like, if you were just a normie and you didn't read the book and you were like going in totally cold, it would be like a nightmare. But that's like his whole brand. So like I like seeing stuff like that and trying to get inspiration from all different types of sources, not cartoons. Because I love watching cartoons. I'm sure Karine talked about this too, because she's similar, that like seeing things that are outside of cartoons enriches your experience.
Yeah,
like,
having good media diet.
Yeah, and like trying to pick up poses, like even like watching Seinfeld. I saw that I was and you know, stand-up comedy in general. I love stand-up comedy, like, because when it's just one person performing, you really get to see their gestures come out, and like you're picking up more for your library, your like mental library of like, this is how people talk. Because there's definitely a syndrome of people who they only watch cartoons and they have a job because they're very familiar with the cartoon tropes, but then you'll get poses back that are like, I can't believe it. Like who, like, when was the last time you saw someone like throwing their arms up in the air like excitedly and not as a joke. Like knowing the context for all these different gestures and how they're used and how they make sense in context is very important, especially for a board artist. Like, you really need to study human behavior and not be like stuck in your hole. Like, go outside, touch grass, basically. So that's did I answer the question? I think I went off on a tangent.
Oh, no. Like, trust me. Look, around here, like, as long as we have good conversations, like, tangents are completely fine. But no, you did answer the question. Before transitioning into another question, like, I can relate. Like, admittedly, I am guilty of, like, mostly watching animation, but that's also kind of because, like, a lot of the stuff, even if it's like live action, it's kind of niche, and I don't really have a lot of people to geek out upon.
Yeah,
like
finding people to talk about it with you too is it's a gift, because, like, you know, Karina was the one who told me about RuPaul's Drag Race, and I wouldn't have necessarily checked it out unless she had said, like, you gotta watch it for the poses. You gotta. And, like, I don't know. There's also, like, just going down YouTube holes and getting, like, really sucked into other people's worlds. Like, here's a good example. I did an episode, I was boarding on an episode called Record Book, where Starfire grows out her nails really, 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 really long. And in order to do research for that, I had to look up videos of, like, okay, well, how do these Guinness Book Record long nail people handle things? Like, how do they move around in the world? Like, like if your nails are that long, it sort of limits your gestures. So I was like, okay, well, I need to know how they do stuff like that. And it really, like, sends you down a rabbit hole of, like, okay, well, having long nails is an inherently female quality, quote unquote. So a lot of women who get into doing the long nails are doing it because they're exaggerating this symbol of femininity, and it makes them feel good. You know, it's like an identity affirmer. So, like, there are these clubs of women who, like, you know, they hang out at these nail salons and they paint their nails and they spend so much money on their nails. And, like, you know, you ask them, like, would you date a man if he wanted you to cut your nails short? And they were like, no. Like, if he doesn't like the nails, he can fuck off. And then the women with the really long nails see it as a huge point of pride. And they keep their nails really, I mean, like, as clean as you can keep really long nails like that.
Oh, wow.
And they're like razors. It's like, it's wild stuff. And they can't, like, some of them, like they paint the nail up until, like, a certain point, and then it's just so long that it would cost, like, thousands of dollars for them to paint the whole nail. But then, so conversely, the men who do these long nail challenges are, like, the complete opposite, where they're doing it, like, pretty much out of spite. Like, there was this one guy who was, like, he is, like, an Indian guy. I think his name's Chalal or something like that. And his teacher was like, you'll never know what it's like to break a nail. You'll never understand unless you grow nails of your own. And so he was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fucking grow it then. And so he did for, like, the rest of his life. And he finally had to cut off this, like, giant curly fry of a nail off of his hand because it paralyzed his hand.
No.
Like, and that stuff is stuff that I would never, it's so fascinating to me on a human level. And I was doing it all for research for this board. And, like, so I was using that to inform, like, okay, well, what shape of nail is the grossest? And it's definitely the curly fry nail, for sure. But because she's a woman, she would, like she'd take care of it. So it would be, like, a perfect curl for, like, a long, straight, like, spear. So like that kind of stuff is really funny to me. Like the character decision, like the motivation that goes into why characters do what they do.
Yeah.
That stuff is really fascinating to me.
Man. Yeah, that was a doozy.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so much more too that you can explore on YouTube. Like, I love just like, you know, you click on some of those, you know, say I'm clicking on all these like long nail videos, suddenly I'm getting more like weird fetish stuff from like TLC. That's like, can you believe this guy is into popping balloons? And it's like, I wonder where that comes from. Like, what's the deal with that? Like, where does this behavior originate? And like,
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. And I think like even like if you're interested in boarding and you're interested in cartoons, like getting really interested in human behavior is critical because there's this other piece of advice that I wanted to share here.
Sure.
So Scott Mccloud is a really famous writer on comics.
Yeah.
And he's written many graphic novels about comics, and understanding comics is one of the most famous ones. And there's a concept in there that like really changed the way I think about cartoons, which is that like there's this spectrum of reality where like on one end there's a photograph of someone that like you look at this photograph and you can immediately be like, that's not me. And then on the other end of the spectrum is like a circle with two dots and a mouth, or even less than that, just like an oval for a head. Yeah. And like that you can look at and be like, that could be me. That could be anybody.
Yeah.
And then in the middle is like cartoons, like any kind of like abstracted like symbol of a face, like je ne sais pas pipe. Like this is not like this is a character, and it's simultaneously not me, but also me.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think about all the time when it comes to cartoons, because cartoons allow anyone of any age to project their identity into a character and live their life through this character and really like glean as much meaning from their story as possible in a psychologically safe way. Because like there's this other concept of like, you know, you go to a therapist thinking that you're gonna like fix your life, or that the therapist is going to fix you, and then they say like, you know, well, you need to do XYZ, and then it's like, don't tell me what to do. Yeah. Like, and like when it's a third person situation where it's like, okay, here's this character who's kind of like me, and they're experiencing this story that's something that I might experience, you know? That gives people a safe place to play out that scenario in their mind without it being a direct attack on their identity.
Right.
And that's something that people of all ages can understand. Like, people associate cartoons with children because, like, children love cartoons, you know?
Yeah.
They're, like, bright colors, you know, they're easy shapes, like, they're easy to understand. But anyone can understand these types of stories. And, like, if the goal is to talk up to kids, then, like, cartoons have a lot of power in that, like, you know, parents will plop their kids in front of the TV and hope to God that they're like getting good messages. Yeah. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, is like talking up to kids and giving them emotional education, essentially, like imbuing them with human stories that allow them to interact with the world in a meaningful way that will keep them alive and keep them thriving, you know? Yeah. So did I answer the question again? I feel like I went off on a tangent. But, like...
No, I think you did. Well, we look, again, we are able to have like a really like, you know, like nuanced discussion around it. So it's okay. It's okay. But I will say, since we do still have like, a couple points of like, no, my notes and like some of your questions. Just want to
Sure. Lightning round.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Okay, so here's a bestie. So I'm really gonna have to read his handle, aren't I?
Oh, is it Nick?
No. Oh, no, not that. But I did see all that. So let me just say this. It's gonna kill me. But the Nick and Kareen, I'm just saying, I see all this. I edit this all myself. I'm not putting all that on screen. I'm not acknowledging it.
Oh, yeah. Nick asked a lot of questions about, like, do these characters kiss? Does Robin and this character kiss? Does Robin and this other character kiss? What are the kissing stats? And, like, he's got lots of goofs and gaffes, especially because he works on the show as a production manager, so he should know.
I saw.
But, you know, I'm just gonna, like, for the purposes of other people, I'll say no spoilies. You'll just have to watch the show and find out whether all these characters kiss or not. The spice is real.
I'll just say on that front, I'm pretty sure Batman X Commissioner Gordon is basically canon at this point.
I mean, for me, it's canon.
Yeah.
For a lot of people on staff, it's canon.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't see any other way of interpreting it, TBH.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. All right, lightning round.
Yes. But the thing that was getting me worked up because one of my friends had like a pretty good question, but I'm gonna have to read his handle. So apologies in advance.
No worries.
So Veritas Joe, otherwise known on Twitter at CuckJoey.
Nice.
Got any funny stories meeting anyone on the shows you work on?
Funny stories about meeting people on shows. I don't know if I necessarily have any like funny stories, but I do really enjoy interacting with the voice actors when I have been in the room, because most of the time board artists are not allowed to be in the voice acting booth.
Aww.
But when I was a director, I was. So like that was really fun.
Yeah.
And then on Titans, I also got to be in the booth a little bit because I wrote 2 episodes. One called Zimdings, which is about typography.
Yeah.
And then another one that was like an Easter episode called Feed Me, which is like the Easter Bunny has like an eldritch horror type. Well, not eldritch horror, but like I was trying to make it a horror type episode about like this unknown rival that the Easter Bunny has. So I might post about that more when Easter comes around again. But like,
for sure.
So I got to be in the booth with all the voice actors, and they're all like really interesting, fun people. And yeah, one of my favorites is Eli Henry, who was the voice of Bam Bam on Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs, and he's incredibly funny. And I really encourage anyone listening to follow him on all social medias, especially TikTok, because he has a lot of like really weird stuff on there that's super fun. And I just like his voice, his performance for Bam Bam is so funny. Like, yeah, he's my favorite character on the show for sure. Someone was asking about favorite characters, and Bam Bam was my favorite for Yabba. And for Titans, it's hard to pick a favorite because I kind of love a lot of them. I mean, like, Beast Boy is probably one of my favorite to draw because he's so expressive and his head is a rectangle.
Right.
And Raven's very easy to draw too, but she's not as expressive. But I mean, like, all of them can be as expressive as you want them to be. Like, right. Who cares? So lightning round. Yes, let's go.
Okay. Another Teen Titans Go question from Check Faster. Will Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island ever be referenced on Teen Titans Go? And is it canon to the Teen Titans Go universe?
Well, I saw that question and I applaud your enthusiasm. But the odds of that are the odds of that happening are low. I'm not going to say they're impossible, but like I'm also not as privy to those decisions as people think I am.
Right.
Like, because by the time I start working on stuff, it's like the script is done. You know, those decisions are already made by the time I
Yeah.
even start working on an episode. Unless I'm writing it, but like, you know, I pitch my own ideas and then like I see where it goes from there. So
Yeah.
sorry, I wish I could help out more, but maybe this is your moment to start a campaign.
I mean, I will say, you know, and obviously I'm like hugely biased because I always like the show, but the sheer power that Teen Titans Go has, you know, just like really hilarious to look back on. I mean, I'll just say it, like somehow this show was able to get De La Soul their masters back, and if that's not just like peak, I don't know what is.
Well, I don't remember I don't quote me on this story, but I'm pretty sure that De La Soul was the one to reach out. Because I think their kids watch the show, and like when you're a celebrity, I think like if you show up in their favorite show, that's like such a win.
Yeah.
But it could have also been to tie in with an album that came out. I'm not entirely sure exactly how those deals go down.
Yeah.
But I know that there is a concerted effort to make Teen Titans Go into like an ambassador show, or like that was definitely the strategy behind that Space Jam special that they did where they watched the movie before the new Space Jam came out. So it was like it's basically a long form ad for the movie.
Yeah, of course.
But obviously we're trying to like give it value adds of comedy. I didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, I did some revisions for that. I didn't work on it directly, but I helped out. So that's all I can say about that.
Yeah. And like and of course, like before transition to a new question, but like on the topic of like crossover, it's like I'm still impressed with like what has crossed over. Like Freakazoid episode was the last thing I was expecting from this show.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know exactly the strategy behind that too, but I know that Rob Paulson. Wait, no, not Rob Paulson. Paul Rudd.
Right. Yeah.
He's awesome. And yeah, they got like that was like one of the last Ed Asner performances that we got to experience. And I worked on that episode and it was really fun. And I'm glad I got a chance to work with such a wacky character. So yeah, like again, I think it's part of that like Teen Titans Go as ambassadors strategy where we're trying to revive old stuff and like, you know, alter children's tastes a little bit, maybe. But like again, a lot of those decisions get made before I even start boarding on anything, so I can't really speak to all the strategy stuff, but like it is fun and I'm glad that it happened.
I'll only half joke about someday getting a high puppy crossover.
There's been too many to count.
Oh yeah. But to transition to one of my questions.
Sure.
And we kind of partially already touched on it, but what are some of your interests and hobbies, and how are you able to put them in your work if you're able to?
So when I'm working full time, right now I'm on hiatus, so I get to indulge in all these other hobbies that I don't usually get time to do. But it's always good to have hobbies that are not screen based. So one of those things for me is gardening. And I kind of like that because I don't really involve it in my work. It has nothing to do with work. And I can just focus completely on like making our balcony space really nice.
Right.
So that's really good to like get away from the screen, especially if you're like in front of it for 8 hours at a time. I recommend going out and touching grass, as I said earlier. But beyond that, I also really like making music. And I actually just released an EP on Bandcamp earlier.
Nice.
It's called Casita, and I recorded it at my parents' guest house because it's like a nice place to record my own voice for hours and hours. And it's
Yeah.
it's a very, I have like weird mixed feelings about it, because for so much of my career I've been focusing on my career, like
Mhm.
like purely on animation and like getting my shit together so that I can like put food on the table. So
Yeah.
this hobby that I've had since like, I'll say early college, like late in high school, I was in a band. I played violin and sang a little
Ooh.
bit, but it was just like, I was doing it because it was fun and I
Yeah.
liked hanging out and making music with friends.
Yeah.
And in college, I started using GarageBand to record my own voice and like loop it and like make harmonies. And
Ooh.
like the reason I have mixed feelings about it is because it's like it's a form of self-expression for me, but it's like not funny. Like it's not like comedy jokes. It's like like super sappy, emotional, sentimental songs.
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of them, especially from my far past, are about like boys I had crushes on that didn't give a fuck about
Aw.
me. So
Uh.
like it's so not the brand that I've spent like many years trying to build. But at the same time, I really enjoy doing it. Like I like the satisfaction of seeing harmonies line up like that. So since I've been on hiatus, I decided to spend a little time like putting out a collection of songs that I've written over the last 4 years that I've just been like singing in the shower for 4 years. So so that's fulfilling in its own way. Like I don't expect it to go anywhere. I mean, like in the future, I'd love to write a song for a cartoon. That's something that's kind
Yeah.
of on my bucket list, because you can get a lot of money by writing songs. Especially if you write a theme song, because then the theme song plays in front of every episode.
Oh, that would be
Uh,
neat.
so like every time it plays, you get a royalty check. But that's like up to the gods. I don't know when that will happen. I'm just sort of putting it out there like, hey, I do this. It's fun. I would love to do more
Yeah.
of it.
One question that I had, like when you're drawing yourself, like if you're like making doodles or
Hmm.
autobio comics, just like expressing yourself, um, what's your approach on doing that, and how would you advise someone else who wants to do the same?
That's a great question, because autobio was a big part of how I started finding my voice in comics and
Hmm.
boarding, I guess specifically. Uh, my approach with autobio is that, well, first of all, I think it's a good idea to look at other autobio comics that you really love and like
Hmm.
see how other people are expressing themselves in the format in which they're expressing it. Because, like, obviously, your story is going to be unique to you no matter what, because
Yeah.
you are a unique individual. But I did a lot of research going to like zine fests and comic art delay and like looking at other people's uh versions of storytelling and trying to pick out the things that I thought worked the best for how I wanted to express myself and like fusing those pieces together. So like, I mean, for example, like I structured my little mini zines off of other people who are doing those similar types of mini zines, because I felt like, oh, this is like the equivalent of a business card,
Yeah.
and it's something that's unlikely to be thrown away immediately because it's like multiple pages. Because with business cards, I'm sure you know just from networking, period, that like you get a business card from someone and it immediately is lost.
Yeah.
Like every business card I've ever received, nearly every one, I've never looked at it again after I got it the first time,
Right.
which is maybe a little depressing to people who spend a lot on business cards. But at least for art, it feels like it's more functional to give someone a gift rather than making
Right.
it seem like hire me, you know. So, but with auto biocomics specifically, I think it's also really important to practice telling a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. a setup and a punchline, or a series of setups and punchlines that would be reasonably interesting to someone who had no context for your life. Because I think I've definitely seen comics where it's like, oh, clearly this is very funny to this person, but I have no context for why this is funny, so it's not funny to me.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm also assuming that you're doing it to be funny, which is not always the case. Sometimes you want it to be like poignant and meaningful. But if that's the case, you should base it off of other people who have done poignant and meaningful comics.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just experimenting with things and seeing what hits and what doesn't hit, and like seeing what resonates with people and what's maybe a little too obscure or like not being communicated well. Because like the idea is that you're communicating to someone else a feeling that you have of some kind, and you're trying to capture that feeling in a series of symbols, essentially, of like, all right, this is a drawing of a person that represents me, and this is that character interacting with a background or another character or a prop or something like that. And with zines, like, regardless of what, like, whether it's autobio or not, like, if you're making a zine, you want it to represent your strengths. You want it to play to your strengths. So, like, when I was making zines to start, I started with these characters, like, I call them, like, water nymphs, because I would just doodle these characters in the margins of notebooks and stuff like that, and it was very easy and second nature for me to draw their long hair and, like, maybe give them a little quote that, like, says something about their personality, and a lot of it was stuff that I just overheard people saying in the bathroom or something like that, or like at a cafe. Like, I remember one of the lines from one of my early zines is like, he can eat my period ass and he knows it. And I'm like, I actually heard a woman say that, and that's one of the best things ever. Like, it's just like, that's what I mean by being inspired by life. But in any case, you want your zine to represent you, like, who you are. And then when you hand it out to people, they know exactly what you want to do. They know exactly what your skills are. And you're playing to your strengths, so people know that immediately. And it feels like they're receiving a gift where it's like, oh, wow, like, when you're famous one day, I'll be able to sell this for a lot of money or something. Yeah. Or like, this is an heirloom. And yeah, like, making something that has a function, I think, is the core advice of that.
For sure. Because that's something that I've honestly evaluated with myself. Because, like, even as a kid, like, I hadn't, like, I love, like, fan art, and I love, like, like, fantastical characters and all things, but something that I realized in quarantine, just, like, about me as an artist, is that, like, I never really took the time to draw myself, because I just kind of assumed that, like, me or just, like, my stories, like, wouldn't be as interesting. And slowly I'm trying to, just, like, deconstruct that, and just trying to, like, not only just, like, embrace myself, but just, like, what I have to bring to the table.
I think that's an extremely relatable feeling for a lot of people. And I actually, like, this is maybe a little cringe in retrospect, but when I was at my most depressed after getting fired from that first job, I busied myself by writing a comic called Autobio, where I talked about why Autobio comics are so important to me.
I was looking at that last night, yeah.
And it's... I'm trying to find the right words to explain. Because it's a self-esteem thing. Like, when you feel like shit, you think, like, who's gonna care? Right. But, like, all of the stories that have made the biggest impact on me have been stories of people who have struggled through anything. Like, and there's this mentality of, like, oh, well, it's not enough. Like, I haven't struggled enough to necessitate this like expressing to other people how I feel, which I think is a fallacy, because there are a lot of people who feel that way, and and you deserve to feel good. Like, you deserve to feel like your stories have value. And that's like, regardless of how privileged or not privileged you are, like, seeing people overcome challenges is an inherently human thing.
Right.
Like, so that really pulled me out of some of my worst feelings of inadequacy when I was like at my worst. And then, like, you know, the more I told those stories, the more it even like made it linear for me, like thinking about my own situation and how to build myself out of it. Because, like, I mean, that autobio zine is like definitely not my best work at this point, but it really helped me. And like, and like, I can only hope that it helped other people too. I mean,
it helped me.
Oh, thank you. That really makes
no problem.
That really makes me happy. And like, I mean, I'm not really also that concerned with fame or like internet fame, because you know, internet fame, like, there are really great artists out there who have like tons of followers, and that's awesome, especially if they're making money off of freelance or commissions. Like, that's their livelihood. But for people like me, or like, you know, people in my same ilk, like, you don't need a lot of followers to connect with people. And you don't need a lot of followers to connect with a specific audience who could really use your perspective on things. So that's something that I was thinking about going into this interview. Like I hope that I can be that for other people.
Right. And I know there's been like a lot of like debate. I mean, there's always debate about, you know, like followers and worth, you know, big artists, small artists, but especially like lately. And, you know, when I think about like how that relates to me, I kind of just stopped caring. And like, I know like not everyone can or is able to do it. It's not really as much of a pride thing, just like I'm kind of too tired. But then when I realize that it's not just about the quantity, it's about like, for me, just like who is like seeing my work. You know, maybe it's not the best, but the fact that like someone that like I look up to or someone who I'm a fan of made the choice to follow me back, you know, means that, you know, they're seeing my work and they like see me progress. And as long as I enjoy progressing and other people do, and that's really all I need.
I think that's a really healthy mentality, truly. Like, if you're connecting with the audience that you sought out to connect with, that's a win. Like, that's how I feel about TikTok too. Because, like, I mean, I'm definitely having more success on TikTok than I've had on any other social media platform. But even by TikTok standards, like, I'm not like popping off the way that other people are popping off.
Right.
And I know that, but like, I'm more happy about the fact that like I have this audience now that's really engaged, and like, and you have the same thing with your podcast. Like, when you put out an announcement like, oh, I'm doing a podcast with this person, like, ask some questions. You always get questions. That's like, that's a huge victory. And like, I feel the same way with my work now, where like, I mean, like, I get like some posts get more attention than others, but the attention that I do get has been like very positive. And also I value my career, like my career victories a little bit more, in the sense that like my goal is to be the kind of board artist or director or whatever where people hear my name and they say like, oh, if it's Talya, then she'll definitely kill it. Like, that's my goal. Like, I think that's the best that you can hope for, is like you know, you keep your head down, cook, do your work, don't cause trouble. And if you're genuine and your hustle is good and the work becomes better the more you do it. So like, if you're doing a lot, then like you're growing exponentially as an artist. So if you dedicate yourself to good work, then, and you're a genuinely easy person to work with, that's all that anyone could ever ask for. In fact, it's shockingly rare. Like, so, which I know is going to be surprising to some people, but like, yeah, there are a lot of people who are like oddly difficult to work with, and it's like you have all the other things, like why this one thing? So yeah, like those bringing the like the hustle, the head, the heart, and the hands together is like golden for your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh yeah, so we already covered the TikTok bit. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sure thing.
So just to wrap up, we have like one final viewer question. Senor Waberto asks, what do you think is the best way to learn software like Storyboard Pro if you know how to storyboard but need to learn how to use the software?
That's a great question. Because a lot of people are worried about like, oh, did I learn the right software? Like, am I investing my time correctly? Like,
yeah,
like, should I buy Storyboard Pro? Should I get Flash instead? Like, what should I do? And I mean, technically speaking, I learned how to board in Photoshop through that Rad Secrets class.
Ooh.
And Photoshop is a terrible program for boarding, in my opinion. It's very clunky, but Rad's been using it for years. And his point in doing that, I mean, he didn't require that we work in Photoshop. He was just like, use whatever program you have, because the same principles apply with boards to whatever program you're going to use.
Right.
So, I mean, I think the best way to learn any software is just by doing a project in that software. Because you can look at tutorials and like learn individual skills, but I feel like most of what you're going to get out of that is like looping GIFs or GIFs or whatever of things that are like shards that, you know, you put out and it's like, oh, well, I mean, that's cool. Like, I'm glad you learned how to do that. But when you're working on a project, then you start asking yourself questions like, how do I do a zoom out? How do I do a zoom in? How do I do a crossfade? How do I achieve this type of perspective? How do I like capture this type of emotion? And you're tailoring your questions to what you personally want to express. So regardless of what software you're using, it's really just like learning a different language. Like, I mean, I work in Flash on a regular basis. I was just recently doing some freelance in Storyboard Pro, and I was a little worried about like, oh, like I hope I can do this on time, considering that I'm not that familiar with the software. But it's pretty straightforward in a lot of ways. And even though I had like some trouble trying to do the same things that I like to do in Flash, I figured it out. Like, even if it was clunky, like, I'm sure, like, if there were other people around me that I could ask to, like, look over my shoulder and tell me, like, how do I do this? Like, that's the most success I've had with learning a software, is asking other people. And there are plenty of YouTube tutorials, too, but, like, sometimes they don't, they aren't specific enough to, like, what exactly you want to do.
Yeah.
Like, how do I make like all these rocks explode into multiple shards and pieces? Or like, how do I loop this in Storyboard Pro? Because like looping anything in Storyboard Pro has been kind of a struggle for me. But that, I know that people are able to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I just need to learn. So, you know, it's always a learning process. Like, you never stop learning how to do things. And yeah, it's just like experience is the best teacher.
Yeah. It really is. You know, sometimes, you know, you just have to just like put all your energy in just like something and do it, because it's not going to be like the final time you make something on your own, but you gain a little bit of experience each time and you get better and you get better. And, you know, people like to see progress.
Yeah. I mean, I look back on my student films, like my live action student films, and cringe, because there were so many things that I wanted to be able to do that we just didn't have the resources for. Or like one day, one of my like classmates forgot to bring a prop, and so like we just didn't have that prop. And like that's another thing that I really love about animation is like, all right, if you want that prop, just draw it. Like we don't have to like go to the store and buy the thing. So but even then, like, I'm glad I did those things because like it was worth it for me to learn how to work in a group. It was worth it for me to learn how to direct people. I told this story to that there was a CS Fullerton student that asked me some questions for a school project, and this was one of the stories I told about when I was in college. My last year, I took this class called Advanced Production, which was basically like a directing class.
Mm-hmm.
And it was taught by Professor Eagleson. I don't know if he's around at BU anymore, but he was great, and I felt like I really grew in that class because I when I started the class, the idea is that you're making a short. So like you pitch the idea, and I pitched this idea in the class of like, okay, I want to do this ghost story about a girl who she lives in this inn with her aunt, and her like she's an orphan outside of her aunt, and her aunt is really abusive, and she's like making her pretend to be a ghost that haunts this inn so that they can get more money for the inn or whatever. And then like that girl ends up befriending a stranger in the inn who ends up being like the ghost of her mom, and then she like leaves the house at the end. And I pitched this in the room, and people were like, whoa, that's a really cool story. And I was like feeling really good about myself. And then I had a meeting with my professor later on, and he basically told me like, this is a great story, but you're not going to be able to achieve this with the resources that you have, I think, because you'd have to rent a house, you'd have to do all these special effects. Like, this is outside of your scope for right now. And that was like I felt depressed about it because I was like, damn it, then what do I do? And so he was like, well, let's talk about it, and we'll brainstorm how to change every detail around the story so that you're still telling the core story. Like, what is it that you really want to say?
Yeah.
And I was just talking about how I mean, this is specific to like my own mom's situation, but like she really had to look for female role models outside of her family to be a woman in the world. And so what it ended up turning into, that story, was like, okay, there's this overbearing like mom who, and the main character is a child actress. So she's being led around by her mom, even though like she used to be a child, now she's an adult, and she's still being led around by her mom. And so like they go to this audition, and that the female director who's leading the audition gives this girl some guidance to improve her performance, and it's a transformative moment for her. And then when they leave the audition, the mom, like the abusive mom, is like spouting off on something, and then the girl like closes the door to the car without getting into the car, and the mom just drives away because she like doesn't even know that her daughter's in the car with her. Oof. And so like it's when it played at my final screening, people laughed, and it was funny because it's like, yeah, this woman's like totally out of, like, she's not in reality with her daughter. Yeah. And now this daughter is like free to do what she wants, you know? And that was a really, like, even though I can't really use that for my portfolio anymore because it's so old, and also like it's not animation. Yeah. It was a lesson that I've applied to writing and directing and boarding, that like, if you know what you want to say, you can change every detail to make it something that you can make, you know? Right. Like to make it achievable and feasible so that like you can become a better artist faster. You don't have to like get hung up on like, oh, it has to be this, like I need this specific thing, and like like the more you put out, even if it's bad, you're still getting better, you know?
Yeah.
So I hope that's encouraging for anyone who's like feeling hung up on stuff like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Honestly, I think I need to hear a little bit about that myself because, like, personally, like, I'm really ambitious and I'm also perfectionist, but I'm basically entirely self-taught. So it is like kind of, well, not like spiteful, but it's just like frustrating when I see like, other people, even people younger than me, just like leagues beyond me. I'm just like, I'm not mad at them. I'm mad at me because I want to be better, because I know I can do better.
Again, another really relatable feeling. Like, there are so many people out there who feel like that they're going too slow or that it's too late for them, and it's just simply not true. Because everyone's situations are different, and like for all those people who like go viral or whatever, like if you're jealous of someone, you have to be jealous of their whole life, and you don't know what's going on with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like if you're dedicated to connecting with an audience and you're dedicated to making that work as good as you can in the time period that you are currently existing, then I think that's all you can really do. I mean, like you're doing exactly what you need to do is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I think that's actually like a pretty good note to end our episode on.
Yeah.
But before we depart for good, obviously this has been just like a great discussion. But before we depart for good, where can people find you? And now that Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs
yes, the plugs.
Yeah. Yes.
So Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs comes out on September 30th on HBO Max, and I would love it if you could watch it. I directed 2 episodes that are in that like first, the first and final season.
Yeah.
You can find them. It's like if you have HBO Max, you'll find it. But
Yeah.
And then Teen Titans Go, there are new episodes coming out now. Like I think one just came out called Polyethylene and Terephthalate that I boarded on. And there's more coming out Saturday mornings on Cartoon Network or the Cartoon Network app.
Yeah.
I am on social media at Talya on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
Yeah.
And on TikTok, I answer a lot of questions about storyboarding and animation. So I've been doing more interview stuff like this. So I'm going to start posting clips of interview stuff. But on top of that, I'll also be posting animatics of stuff that I've boarded or written. And I might start posting my music there too. I'm also on Bandcamp if you just search up Talya Perper.
Yeah.
And I wrote those Steven Universe books.
Yeah, of course.
At Barnes and Noble and anywhere you find comic books, just search up my name and you'll find it. But Neato. I think that's everything.
Yeah, quite a resume. And I guess for me, as always, if you're listening to this podcast, you should be on anchor.fm/KashCast, KASHCAST. In between our last and this current episode, I was actually able to get on Apple Podcasts, so that's another way you can listen. Really would appreciate the plays. Not just on YouTube, but thank you for the views there. But, like listening on the podcasting platforms actually helps more than you think. If you want to follow, it would probably be easiest to follow my personal Twitter, KSH _CASH_, because I have like everything else, my art account, the podcast account, in my bio from there. I do YouTube. You can find me under KashCast. That's where I upload the podcast, and I'm trying to get back into more edit reviews. Obviously, art, everything, life has been getting away, but I'm doing some stuff. But with that, It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. If you're ever interested in coming back, obviously the door's wide open.
Oh,
And
of
this has
course.
just been great.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being able to have a platform and talk to you and other people about animation in general. It's just a joy. So thank you.
Yes. Oh, no problem. Thank you for being on and just being supportive. I truly appreciate it.
Anytime.
And with that, we are finally going to wrap up another episode of the KashCast. I have been Cash.
And I am Talya Perper.
And we will both see you next time. Just remember to take care, stay safe, wear a mask, and love and peace always.